Which is better, the OnePlus Nord N20 5G or the OnePlus Nord N200 5G? Well, in this video, we're going to find out. Now, the names of these two devices might be a bit confusing because essentially the only difference is that we have an extra zero with the Nord N200 5G. But the Nord N20 5G was launched in April of 2022, so still a very recent device from OnePlus, whereas the Nord N200 5G was launched in July of 2021. In addition to that, the Nord N200 5G is supposed to be a tier lower than the N200 5G because the N200 5G is actually the successor of the N10 5G. And then this device was the successor to the N100. So I'm definitely predicting that pretty soon there will be an N300 5G, and I'll definitely be comparing this phone to that phone. But in the meantime, if you walk into T-Mobile or Metro by T-Mobile, you're going to see both of these devices currently available. So I figured this video would be pretty helpful, showing you all the various differences and similarities. Now, the first difference of these two devices is the display and the display size. So with the N20 5G, we have a 6.43-inch display compared to a slightly larger 6.49-inch display with the N200 5G. And then beyond that, there's also differences in the display technology. So with the N20 5G, we have an AMOLED display compared to an IPS LCD display. So with the Nord N20, we're going to be getting much better viewing angles and colors as well. Things are also a lot brighter here with this display. That being said though, with the Nord N200, we do have a 90 Hz refresh rate, so a little bit of a faster refresh rate compared to the N20, which does give us a 60 Hz refresh rate. Now, both displays are 1080p. We do have a slightly different PPI with 409 for the N20 compared to 405 with the N200. Now, both phones do have 20:9 aspect ratios, so more narrow but taller form factors. And with the N20, we have an 85.3% screen-to-body ratio compared to an 83.7% screen-to-body ratio with the N200. Now you can see side by side here, the two phones are pretty similar in size. The N200 is slightly larger, but we have a pretty similar form factor and design for both of these. You can see with both phones, we do have hole punches for the front-facing cameras, and those are situated in the upper left sides. Now, both of those cameras are also 16 megapixels, so keep that in mind as well. Now, the amount of storage that we're getting is different with these two phones. So with the N20, we're getting 128 gigabytes of storage, and then with the N200, we're getting half of that at 64 gigabytes. And both of these phones do support microSD card expansion, so if you do happen to fill up the internal storage on either of these two devices, then you can always add in a microSD card to offload photos and videos, for example. But it is at least nice that with both of these phones, we're at least getting a decent amount of internal storage, especially considering that they're kind of in that mid-range, lower-end segment. I would say 64 gigs is kind of the minimum nowadays, but at the same time, you can get pretty far with 64 gigabytes of storage if you're not downloading necessarily too many apps and games and things like that. Now, neither of these two devices feature wireless charging, but they do both have fingerprint sensors. However, the implementation is different. So with the Nord N20 5G, the fingerprint sensor is located within the display itself. So we'll give that a try right now. It's very fast and responsive. We'll try that out one more time. So as you can see, a great implementation there, and it definitely gets the job done. And then with the Nord N200 5G, the fingerprint sensor is located on the power button. So we'll try that. Also very fast and responsive. We'll try that one more time. So that does work really well. Now technically, having the fingerprint sensor in the display is a little bit more of a premium feature in comparison to having it on the power button, but at least both work really well. And in addition to that, both of these devices do feature face unlock, so I appreciate that we do have multiple methods for accessing these devices. Now taking a look at the cameras on the back of these two phones, both devices do have triple camera setups. As you can see, the designs of the camera modules themselves are a bit different, and the megapixel counts that we're getting for the main cameras are different with these phones. So with the Nord N200 5G, we have a 64 megapixel main camera compared to a 13 megapixel main camera with the Nord N200 5G, and then both cameras have the same setup for the depth sensing and macro cameras, with both being 2 megapixels. Now here's how things look on the camera apps on both devices. This is with the main cameras right now on both of them. Then from here, we can head over to the More tab to access the macro cameras. So we can get very close up here and have things be in really good detail. Then we can get out of there and head over to portrait mode on both phones. So you can see we have really nice blurred out backgrounds. And then we can flip around and do the same thing with the front facing cameras. So we can take portrait selfies. And if you want to as well, you can take standard selfies. So definitely a lot of different abilities when it comes to the cameras on both of these phones. Of course, unfortunately, both of these phones are lacking ultra wide angle cameras. So if that is a feature you like to use, then unfortunately you're not getting that here. Now there's definitely a lot of differences when it comes to the RAM and processors that you're getting here with these devices. I will say overall, I'm pretty disappointed with how slow the Nord N200 is, and especially after it got the update to Android 12. Now thankfully the Nord N20 5G is decently fast, so I've been pretty happy with the performance that we're getting here. But essentially with the RAM, we're getting 6GB of RAM versus 4GB of RAM, and then we're getting the Qualcomm Snapdragon 695 5G processor compared to the Qualcomm Snapdragon 480 5G processor. Now I did run a benchmark test using Geekbench 5 with both phones, and there's definitely quite a difference here when it comes to the results from that test. You can see here I got a single core score of 679 compared to 385 with these two devices, and then the multi-core scores are pretty different as well, with 1966 compared to 1348. So without a doubt, the Nord N20 5G is the faster phone of the two. It really is a very significant difference, which is a bit disappointing. And in addition to that, I did recently update to Android 12 from Android 11, and you can see when the phone was on Android 11 before, I had much faster benchmark scores. So it dropped the single core score down from 463 to 385. So I'm glad this phone at least did get updated to Android 12, but I don't think OnePlus is doing a very good job here with optimizing that software. But it is what it is. It's a bit unfortunate, but that's why I'm here. I want to show you those differences. Now, unfortunately, video recording is limited at 1080p for the front and rear cameras with both of these phones, so there is no 4K video recording, which is a bit disappointing. Now, with the Nord N20 5G, we have a 4,500 mAh internal battery, compared to a slightly larger 5,000 mAh internal battery with the Nord N200 5G. However, another major difference is the speeds these phones can be recharged at. So we are getting a bigger battery with this phone, but on the other hand, with the Nord N20 5G, this phone supports 33 watt fast charging, and they include a 33 watt fast charger in the box, whereas with the Nord N200 5G, fast charging is limited at 18 watts. So even though this phone does have a slightly smaller battery, you can recharge it a lot faster compared to the Nord N200. Now thankfully with these two devices, we do have NFC included, so if you do like to make mobile contactless payments using tap and pay, then you can do that with either of these two phones, which is excellent. But now that we've gone over a variety of different things about these two devices, let's take a closer look at the hardware in general. So I already talked quite a bit about the front panels here. Things are pretty similar. Both phones do have slightly thicker bottom bezels, but I do appreciate that both phones do have hole punches for the front-facing cameras. So in general, the form factors of these two devices are really good. Now taking a look at the left side of both phones, they both have a slot for the microSD card and SIM card, and we also have volume up and volume down. Now you can see that the side rails on these two phones are different in the sense that with the Nord N20 5G, it is a matte finish, whereas we have a glossy finish with the side rails on the Nord N200 5G. Then on the right side of the two phones, we just have the power buttons, and then on the Nord N200 5G, the power button does double as a fingerprint sensor. Then up top here on both phones, we have the noise canceling microphones, and then taking a look at the bottom of both devices, we have an identical setup with a 3.5mm headphone jack, a microphone, USB-C port for charging and data transfer, and we have the speaker. And then taking a look at the back of both devices, I already talked quite a bit about the camera modules, but with both phones we do have triple camera setups, but the actual camera modules themselves do have a little bit of a different design. Now I do appreciate that both phones do have kind of this matte finish that has a wavy look to it. You can see the general designs are a bit different. The Nord N20 5G definitely has a much boxier look compared to a more streamlined, rounded look with the Nord N200 5G, but I think both phones do look really nice. Now both devices are made completely out of plastic, but that being said though, these phones do look and feel a lot more premium than you'd expect. And then finally, let's see what all comes included in the boxes for these two devices. Now you can see the only difference as far as the front of the boxes go with these two phones is that with the N200 we have an extra 0 here, so pretty funny. Now with the Nord N20 5G we have a SIM card removal tool included. I believe there was also one included with the N200, but I think I lost it. But both phones also give us some literature as well. And then both phones have USB-C cables for charging and data transfer, and we have the wall adapters. So the wall adapters do look very similar, but again with the Nord N20 5G it is 33 watts, which is really cool. Whereas with the Nord N200, it does max out at 18 watts. Nonetheless though, I'm glad that we at least have wall adapters included, because in 2022, that's not something that's typically that common anymore, unfortunately. And in addition to that, it's excellent that these charge the devices very quickly, because typically, even if a smartphone manufacturer provides a charger in the box, it's usually their lowest end charger they can possibly provide. And never mind, the SIM card removal tool is hidden on this card that's located in the packet of literature for the N200, so it's a good thing we have that included here. But this concludes my comparison of the OnePlus Nord N20 5G versus the OnePlus Nord N200 5G. In general, these are both pretty decent mid-range, lower-end devices from OnePlus, and the OnePlus Nord N200 5G was definitely a very successful phone and still is very successful at T-Mobile and Metro, so I'm expecting the Nord N20 5G to be the same way. Now, of course, this phone is meant to be one tier lower than this phone, as you could tell probably from everything that I've gone over in this video. But I'm definitely curious to know if you own either of these two phones. Did you get it on a deal? Because I know for the N200, they were offering this phone for free for a while if you're switching in from another carrier. So it's most likely that whoever ends up getting these phones is probably going to pay a fraction of the MSRP. So again, if you ended up getting either of these two phones, what made you make that choice? And what deal did you end up getting on them? I'm definitely really curious to know. But again, thanks for watching. This is Kevin here, and I will see you in the next video.